You shall not covet. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and you shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, or his male servant, his ox or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. The 10th commandment is unique among the commandments, for it is the only commandment that happens within a person's mind. To commit idolatry, you have to make an idol. There's got to be an idol somewhere. To commit murder, there's going to be a body. To commit blasphemy, there are going to be words that have to issue out of your mouth that someone might hear. To commit adultery, there would have to be another person that you weren't married to. To commit theft, there would be something hidden under your bed that you had taken that you shouldn't have. But to commit coveting, you only need a thought in your mind. It's the only commandment that unless you acted on the covetous thoughts, there would be no possibility of physical evidence whatsoever. So this commandment is unique in that way. It's also the root of so many of the 9 commandment violations. Israel was always coveting the gods and idols of other nations. They were fancy and beautiful and comforting. You could look at them and touch them, and so they wanted them. They wanted them over and over again. Coveting was at the root of the episode of the golden calf. Achan coveted the treasure from Jericho, and so he took it. David obviously coveted Bathsheba. The men of Gibeah coveted the Levite man until he sent out his concubine to take his place. Ahab coveted the field of Naboth. And notice, Deuteronomy literally forbids the coveting of a neighbor's field. And remember, Naboth's field actually bordered the royal property of Ahab and Jezebel. They were actually and literally neighbors. Ahab violated this commandment to the letter of the law. So the commandment against coveting seems to be a foundational one. As if you were able to keep your thoughts in check, you might also be able to keep your actions in check too. We see this in the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus extends the moral life of a disciple to what happens within us. He says that anyone who has looked on someone else with lust has already committed adultery with them. He says anyone who hates his brother is already guilty of killing them. So, by commanding us to not covet, God is seeking to rein in our actions by reining in our minds. And in the pattern of commandment violations in the early Old Testament, there need not be a story for Baruch to lay out which shows that this particular commandment was violated in the next successive book, because it had already been broken over and over again explicitly. That must have pleased Baruch, because the book of Kings is the last book of the Deuteronomistic history. If he needed a 10th book in which the 10th commandment was violated, he would have had to have written an entirely new book. But that was unnecessary. Coveting had already been sufficiently covered. So now that we're at the end of our journey, what do you make of coveting? And what do you covet?